What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to Talkin Mets and Rob with another off-season video right here on the channel. And today we are talking about the top 5 Mets GM candidates to run the organization under David Stearns. We have a lot to talk about with that, and there's a couple of interesting candidates that I'm actually going to bring up, and there's one person that a lot of people might not know, and I'm going to give a little information and details about him and why he is probably one of the top 5 candidates for David Stearns in his search for a general manager. And we're also going to give a couple of honorable mentions that you see on the screen as well. So we're going to get started right away. We know Billy Epler resigned because of the MLB investigation, and there is a lot of concerning thoughts that most likely David Stearns really did not really want to work with Billy Epler. He wanted to start fresh, even though the MLB investigation kind of made it easier for David Stearns to not work with Billy Epler. So first, we are going to start with candidate number 1. There's been reports, Bob Nightingale and a couple of other reporters have reported that a favorite amongst GM candidates is James Click. Now, you might have heard that name a couple of years ago because he is currently the vice president for the Blue Jays. But before that, you might have heard him as the Astros general manager, who was hired in 2020 after the whole cheating scandal came out about the Houston Astros, and that whole organization was in turmoil. Managers leaving, GMs meeting, owners getting fined. The Astros lost the first and second round picks in their 2020 and 2021 draft, and that's what he was put into as the GM of the Astros. He had one top 100 prospect and the second highest payroll in baseball. And oh, by the way, when he got his draft picks back in 22, he drafted Drew Gilbert with the 28th overall pick and Ryan Clifford, the 11th round pick in the 2022 draft. And oh, by the way, also, they are now prospects for the New York Mets in the Justin Verlander deal. So James Click is probably one of the favorites to be the GM of the New York Mets. But there is a couple of more when we really get down and dirty into the package of who is going to be the best person under Stearns as the GM. Next up, we have Matt Klentak. Now, you might have heard of him because he made 2 very prominent signings as GM of the Philadelphia Phillies, and that is Bryce Harper and former Met Zach Wheeler. So right now, he is a special assistant in the Brewers organization, which obviously David Stearns knows very well. So he was the GM of the Phillies from 2015 to 2020. He had a lot of losing seasons under below 500 and one season at 500, but they were just going through that rebuilding stage after those NL East titles and championships, you know, with the Ryan Howards, Chase Utleys, and all of those guys when it came to the Phillies. And he took over basically a mess of the Phillies organization after those years in an older Phillies team that was declining, obviously. So we had to rebuild that team. So he wasn't great when you look at it as, you know, record-wise, but he slowly built up the team again. And you see what the Phillies are now, which are a very good team. And obviously Bryce Harper and Zach Wheeler are a big part of what the Phillies have been doing over the last 2 years. And yes, it took a little bit of time when Bryce Harper and Zach Wheeler been a part of the team, you know, not making the playoffs for a couple of years. And it seemed like all it took was a couple of extra players like Castellanos and Schwarber to add to that. And of course, a better manager in Rob Thompson over Joe Girardi. But Klentak is a guy that is not afraid to make the big signing. I think he has a little bit of influence, maybe even the same, I would say, thought process as David Stearns. And obviously, they know each other from the Brewers organization. So that's something where Klentak could possibly be another favorite and probably will be interviewed by David Stearns to be the next GM of the New York Mets. Number 3 on the list is Ben Sanovich. Now, yes, he is a Harvard grad, baseball player for Harvard. And you're going to be like, who the hell is this? Well, he is part of the Braves organization where a lot of teams are going to start trying to pick from. And listen, you offer them money, you offer them a higher position in another organization, they might take it. And Ben Sanovich is one of those guys. But it's going to be hard to get him. Why? Because he's currently working under Alex Anthopoulos of the Atlanta Braves, who was the GM of the Atlanta Braves. He's the assistant GM and player development guy within the organization. He started off with the Padres organization as an intern for baseball operations and stayed with the Padres for a long time, 10 years, as he started as an intern. And during that tenure with the Padres was the director of player development. And the Padres, developed some pretty damn good players over that period. But what you see now is that, obviously Sanovich is not the only guy that is doing good things within the organization of the Atlanta Braves. But when you're under Alex Anthopoulos, you clearly are respected within that organization. They trust him with player development as well and scouting that he helps with as well. So that is something where I think if you offer him a GM spot, I think he would gladly run from the Braves organization to the Mets organization, because you're not going to go into baseball and be an assistant GM and not looking to be a GM of a Major League Baseball team. There's only 30 of those jobs. So I would really think that David Stearns is going to be looking for a guy who is successful in his role, who people trust in an organization that, let's be honest, is probably one of the best organizations in baseball in regards to scouting and development. And you heard a lot of the players. You heard a lot of guys like Acuna, Albies, Swanson. All those guys talked about how they played almost every day in the minor leagues. There was a certain way to go about your business with the Atlanta Braves throughout their farm system. And Sanovich is one of the key parts of player development. And Anthopoulos trusts him to be his assistant GM. So if David Stearns can find a way to take him from the Braves organization, that can only help this Mets organization going forward. But does Sanovich want to be a part of the New York Mets organization under David Stearns, where I don't think David Stearns is going to be really that much of a guy that's going to take control 100% unless Sanovich just be a title. I think he'll give Sanovich a little bit of reign here since he was working under Anthopoulos, and Anthopoulos has been, killing it with the Atlanta Braves for a number of years now. You see what he's done with this, with bringing guys up at the right time through their farm system and trading for guys and then signing them for basically cheaper deals, and that's been excellent. And who knows how much Sanovich actually is a part of that and actually has done with Anthopoulos to make the Braves organization being one of the best in baseball. So Ben Sanovich is one of those guys that if you can take away from an organization that had been doing it right for a while now and one of the dominant teams in baseball, maybe David Stearns could look at him to be a part of this organization as the New York Mets next GM. So number 4 on the list is a lot of people know, and he was one of the finalists for the Mets GM role prior to Brodie Van Wagenen being chosen as the Mets GM. Chaim Bloom is a guy that was a hot executive in the Rays organization that everybody wanted. Everybody was interviewing him. Everybody wanted guys like that, low payroll, basically doing well every year with their organization, and they're not spending no money. But Chaim Bloom was hired by Henry to be basically the chief baseball officer of the Boston Red Sox. And at that time, when Chaim Bloom came in, Henry was looking to cut payroll. And what better guy than a person like Chaim Bloom, a part of the Rays organization, that knows how to do it, or at least has been doing it with the Rays with a lower payroll, and knows how to scout, knows how to pick the right players. And Henry was like, well, I need to cut payroll. Why not bring Chaim Bloom in here to figure things out? And his first order of business was to trade Mookie Betts to the Dodgers. And we know the guys that were involved. Verdugo is a good player. Jeter Downs is not even in the organization of the Red Sox anymore. And it's been a complete disaster. And that was already something that a lot of Met fans are concerned David Stearns is going to do with Pete Alonso. Chaim Bloom is a guy that first order of business was to trade Mookie Betts. And again, I don't know how much was that Henry more than Chaim Bloom because he wanted to cut payroll, and I think Henry knew he was not going to pay Mookie Betts, which was very interesting since, why wouldn't you trade? Why would you want to not sign one of the best players in baseball in Mookie Betts at his, tender age of his prime? But he traded him to the Dodgers, and it wasn't really a really good trade. Not only that, he lets Bogart walk, go to the Padres. He traded Benintendi, didn't sign Schwarber, and signed Trevor Story to a 6-year, $140 million deal with his injuries and, mostly a product of Colorado. And it's been a complete disaster under Chaim Bloom. And now Chaim Bloom is looking for a job as he was fired as the GM, Chief Baseball Officer of the Boston Red Sox. So that is something that is very interesting to look at Chaim Bloom. But I think there's something with Chaim Bloom that I think baseball organizations still like. And David Stearns is looking for somebody who is analytical, that's going to be working together, that's going to have a partnership along with the manager, that I think that could be a good, doesn't mean that he's not a good scout or not a good player development guy or doesn't know what he's doing. I think he got a raw deal in Boston. I think Henry was calling more of the shots than we actually think. And all the shots that were going after Henry and all the fans' dismay in Boston, I think Henry had no choice but to fire Chaim Bloom. And I do think that Bloom got more of the blame when Henry was probably calling a lot of the shots because he did want to cut payroll and wonder why things didn't go so well when he got rid of guys that could clearly help your team going forward in Betts and Benintendi and Schwarber, and you didn't want to spend the money, and now it's Chaim Bloom's fault. So I'm not saying Chaim Bloom is, a great executive here, but he was doing things right in Tampa Bay, and I don't think he's doesn't know what he's doing in Boston. So that's another guy, Chaim Bloom, that is very interesting to look at for David Stearns as the GM of the New York Mets. Last but not least is a guy that a lot of people probably don't know, and I try to do my research on him, but he is a guy, name is Sig Mejdal, is a guy that was a NASA employee. He's a biomathematician, mathematical modeler for NASA, but was found to be, with all this analytics going on in the baseball, an asset to organizations. First, he got into baseball with the Cardinals as director of scouting and amateur draft analysis. So what does that mean? A lot of number crunching to scout and draft as well. And you can't really blame what the Cardinals have done over the years, as good as they were. And they haven't picked lower than 18th in the draft for a very, very long time. And, obviously this year it's different, as bad as they were. But he didn't stay with the Cardinals much longer. He went to the Astros in the role of Director of Decision Sciences, more analytical terms and nonsense that a lot of organizations go by, but they just love these type of guys in their departments, in their organizations, crunching numbers and all this analytical stuff, which I think is probably more likely to be successful in the scouting, in amateur drafting and international scouting as well. I think that when it comes to analytically, I think scouting players internationally and in high school and college, I think goes a longer way than doing the analytics what they use in baseball nowadays. So currently, he is with the Orioles and is the right-hand man of GM Mike Elias and helped the Orioles become the number one farm system in baseball. You can't really deny the success of the Orioles farm system. And look what they've done this year and even last year with all their young players that they brought up. And it just shows you how important analytics and data science and all that analytical stuff can help with scouting in the international and amateur scouting for a club. And I think that's really important to pick the right guys, because the Orioles, yes, they haven't been picking in like the top 3 and 5 for many years now, as they basically been tanking to get all these high draft picks, but you also got to pick the right guys as well. Sig Mejdal is a big part of what the Orioles are doing, and a lot of people are going to start taking guys from the Orioles thinking that that's the way to go about it. Sig Mejdal is a guy that I think David Stearns would love. Analytical as heck. He's a mathematician. He crunches the numbers. He clearly is doing something right as teams are taking him away from other teams And you saw what the Astros, how they've been drafting. They've been winning, but still been drafting, lower in the draft, but still picking the right guys. And I do think that's a guy that's going to get an interview for the Mets GM job. And that, I believe, is going to be very interesting going forward. So your 5 top candidates for GM: James Click, Matt Klentak, Ben Sanovich, Chaim Bloom, and Sig Mejdal. And there's a couple of honorable mentions. I'm going to start with the bottom one, which is Kim Ng, who is a woman who has been working in baseball for a long time, under Brian Cashman with the Yankees for a very long time, and finally got the chance to be a GM of the Marlins, and she did a great job. I know she didn't draft a lot of these guys that are up, didn't really do much when it comes to, bringing guys up right away with these teams, but she was given a good rotation, a lot of injuries, but the trades that she made this year, we're bringing in, Luis Ariz and then Bell and all those guys that actually, and then obviously, Robertson wasn't great, but it was a smart move by then. They needed a closer, really didn't work out, but that was good trades, and it helped them make the playoffs. She's a woman that I do think that she is a free agent. I don't think the Marlins are going to let her get away, but she might want to interview around for the same position, or maybe even a higher position, which I don't think she'll get with the Mets. She'll just be basically making a lateral movement to the Mets. Is a very interesting look at King Ng. I think she's going to be with the Marlins, but an interesting choice, and probably could get interviewed by David Stearns. Another guy is Randy Flores. He is the assistant GM with the Cardinals. He is basically in control of the scouting department and in charge of amateur draft as well. He has a lot of notable players that was drafted with Cardinals: Nolan Gorman, Lars Nootbaar, Ryan Helsley, Jordan Hicks, Brandon Donovan, and Jordan Walker. Is a guy that these are guys that were drafted through the Cardinals organization and currently is with the Cardinals at the moment, and is a possible guy that can be get an interview with the Mets. The last guy is Carlos Rodriguez. He is the VP and assistant GM of the Rays, and he oversees the amateur and international scouting as well as player development for the Rays. So Carlos Rodriguez is another guy that is probably going to get interviewed. Again, this is another wide net situation that David Stearns talked about with the manager candidates. It's going to be a wide net of interviews. I think the GM's position is going to have a wide net as well. But my top 5 is James Click, Klentak, Sanovich, Bloom, and Mejdal. And some that probably will get an interview and probably is going to get open the eyes of David Stearns is Flores, Rodriguez, and Ng. And I do think one of my top 5s are going to be the next GM of the New York Mets. We will see. I want to know what you guys think. Who do you think is going to be the next Mets GM going from 2024 and hopefully beyond under David Stearns? Do you think it's my top 5? Do you think it's the honorable mentions or somebody else that I have not mentioned? Let me know in the comments, guys. Once again, guys, I want to thank you guys for watching the video. The top 5 GM candidates for the New York Mets: James Click, Matt Klentak, Ben Sanovich, Chaim Bloom, and Sig Mejdal, and of course honorable mentions in Randy Flores, Carlos Rodriguez, and Kim Ng. Let me know in the comments, guys, what do you think of my top 5 candidates? A couple of honorable mentions. And if I haven't mentioned anybody that was not on the list, please mention them in the comments, guys. Once again, guys, thank you for watching. And as always, Met fans, let's go Mets.